evening. Welcome to 8 o'clock news, and we're your hosts. I'm Imogen Brooks.
I'm Alexa Brass.
And I am Taylor Rhodes.
Today we are talking about the progressive reformers' regulation of the economy. Since the dawn of the industry, monopolies have been running rampant. From coast to coast, titans like Carnegie and Rockefeller have been growing their companies and not letting anyone get in their way.
Monopolies have the power to inflate prices exponentially, and there's nothing we can do about it because they own all means of production.
It is a problem that could lead to a catastrophe, but thanks to men like Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson, the problem has been spearheaded and continues to get better every day.
Now let's focus on Teddy Roosevelt. He started out as vice president to a man who loved big companies, but once he took office, he started the war against trusts.
In 1902, the Northern Securities Railroad controlled most of the shipping in the northern parts of the country. Roosevelt saw the country taking advantage of passengers and hiking prices unnecessarily.
On February 19, 1902, the owner of Northern Securities Railroad, J.P. Morgan, got a call during his dinner and was informed that Roosevelt's Attorney General was filing a lawsuit against the company.
In 1904, the Supreme Court voted to dissolve the railroad company. And instead of precedent that big companies had to abide by the law now, monopolies had no longer washed over.
Now we are going to live to Imogen Brooks, who is chatting with Teddy Roosevelt about the Northern Securities Railroad.
Here today with Teddy Roosevelt himself to talk about his success regarding the Northern Securities Railroad Company. How does it feel to have won, Mr. President?
It feels amazing. Finally, the American will be set free from the constraints of monopoly control. I'm so happy to have my legacy be that of formed and progress.
You know what I have to say about it. Teddy Roosevelt was not without his faults. He didn't go after all our trusts. He only went after those who he deemed bad.
You're right. If in his eyes a monopoly was benefiting the country, he would have been a blind eye.
Who is he to judge that? Shouldn't it have been a flat rule, no exceptions?
That's exactly how I feel. Anyways, let's go back to focusing on the good things that happened during the Roosevelt's presidency.
Sounds good. Let's talk about the Hepburn Railroad Regulation Act of 1906.
And inflation occurred within America. Railroad companies put their prices sky high.
The act of regulating those prices put a limit on how high they could go. The Interstate Commerce Commission, or ICC, was put in charge of companies have to send them annual reports of reviews to make sure not to monopolize them.
Woodrow Wilson continued with Roosevelt started, and when he took office. He signed the Underwood-Simmons Tariff in 1913, which cut the tariffs on wool, steel rail, iron ore, and agricultural products.
Wow. And the federal tax income compensated for the loss of money with the lower tariff, and the upper 1% of tax for it.
Alexa Brass is live now with President Wilson. They're going to talk about the Trust Busters.
Thanks, Imogen. Yeah, President Wilson, how do you feel being one of the famous trust busters?
It feels amazing. I love knowing that what I do every day protects the lower class and creates a stable economy for years or generations to come.
Thank you for your time.
Now let's talk about what Eugene V. Debs brought to the table.
In 1901, he formed the Socialist Party, which attracted many poor workers who were tired of working so hard for such little pay.
Socialism is the middle ground between communism and capitalism. There's a larger distribution of wealth, but not as much drastic as communism.
This is actually a common theme within the progressive era. Capitalism and communism were becoming too extreme, so people sought for a happy medium.
Let's talk back on the topic we discussed earlier in the episode. In 1906, the dollar's worth went down, so in order to make up for the inflation, railroad companies had to raise their ticket prices, but they went too far.
The companies freaked out. They didn't want to lose their wealth, so they went too far, rose the prices too high.
Theodore Roosevelt searched for that common ground and gave people more backing to companies that we talked about earlier, in order to ensure no rule stretching.
The government didn't have full control of the railroads like it would have if it was communist, but it also didn't let companies run around untethered like extreme capitalism.
Dollar diplomacy was becoming a thing around this progressive era as well.
Politicians took to Wall Street and asked bankers to help themselves and their country with the foreign policy.
Bankers were prompted to invest their surplus money into overseas markets, such as the Panama Canal and various other projects in the Far East.
While the diplomacy was mainly sparked by the need to beat all the other countries in the front-running positions for upcoming markets, this also helped Americans' foreign relations immensely, and it boosted economy too.
If you want to remember the most important thing about this show, know about the changing economic popular platform.
Times are changing. Diplomacy can be bought, and the wealth gap may be closing. Discover your options soon.
This is the end of our show today. Thank you and good night.
On the close-up time.